Hi, and welcome to Making Sense of Microbiotic-Me. This is the first of a series of mini lectures I'll do throughout the course. This first one is an introduction to microbes. So microbes are tiny organisms, but very strong or very mighty. And microbiology is actually the study of any living thing that's too small to be seen without magnification. And these would include bacteria, algae, protozoa, and helminths, and also viruses. So if we look at this picture, you'll see relative size of some of the microorganisms that we might be talking about in this class. This brown strand is the size of a human hair. You'll see our first of our microorganisms is the helminth, which is actually visible to the naked eye to some degree. These tend to be different types of worms that we might run into. We also have protozoans, fungi, and it's also showing you in relation to a red blood cell. You can see how big those are. And then the one that we're probably most going to be studying in this class is bacterium. You can see the size of one bacterial cell here versus that human hair. And lastly, we have the smallest, which is the virus. These are much tinier. So when we talk about microorganisms, there are things about microorganisms that make them very easy to study. For example, they reproduce rapidly. We can get large amounts of them grown in a laboratory, and that's a really nice thing because we can do studies if we have lots of them. Now, that being said, that's not necessarily true about all bacteria. Some of the ones found in our microbiome are not as easily to grow. They have not been kind of finalized the best way to grow them in a laboratory. So although in general it's easy, it's mainly for certain types of bacteria. It can also be difficult to study the microorganisms, though, and that's mainly because they're so small that they can't be seen directly. We need microscopes or some other indirect means of studying them. So before we get into the different microorganisms, one of the things I want to talk about is the fundamental characteristics of cells. All of these microorganisms are made up of cells. All living things are made of cells. So to understand what cells are, you need to know that they can come in many different shapes. They have a protoplasm, or kind of a viscous gel-like substance that's encased in either a cell or cytoplasmic membrane. That's kind of what gives it form. In addition, they have some sort of genetic material, whether it's as a chromosome containing DNA or perhaps RNA. And in addition to this genetic material, they have ribosomes, which are there to produce protein, make protein, which is what the cell will need to function. In addition, they have very complex ability to function. They have many functions that they can do within this tiny cell. So when we're talking about microbes, it's nice to get kind of a history of them and a background on microbes and Earth. Bacterial type of organisms have been on the planet for 3.5 billion years. They are the oldest living inhabitants. For about 2 billion years, they were the only living inhabitants on Earth. And the first type of this falls under the category of what are called prokaryotes or prokaryotic cells. Bacteria fall under this. This means that they have no true nucleus. And what that means is their genetic material is not held in a centralized location that's membrane bound. Now, after we had these bacterial cells around, what ended up happening was later on we had the evolution of these eukaryotic organisms. Eukary means a true nucleus. And in that sense, they have a centralized membrane enclosed area that contains their genetic material. And these came about 1.8 billion years ago. So they're not nearly as old as our prokaryotes. And eukaryotic organisms were the precursors to the organisms that eventually formed multicellular animals, including you. So just to make this clear that we've got these two straight, eukaryotic cells are what we find. All the cells in your body are considered eukaryotic cells, the ones that are part of the human body. They're also all the cells that you might find in plants, fungi, and protozoa. So what that means is that they have a nucleus that contains their genetic material. In addition, they have organelles, which are different machinery, basically, that is membrane bound and performs useful functions within the eukaryotic cells. So they have a division of kind of these different parts to it. In contrast, we have what are called the prokaryotic cells, or prokaryotes, and these would be the bacteria that we're going to study this term. These have no nucleus, which means that they don't have their DNA or their genetic material in a centralized membrane area. and they generally don't have these other organelles that are performing these functions. However, they are a complex structure that can do pretty much any activity that a eukaryote can, and in addition, they can function in many ways in a way that the eukaryotes can't do. So this is just a basic introduction to microbes. We'll get into different microbes and some other topics in a couple of other mini lectures. If you have any questions on this, please contact me either through email or you can instant message me during my office hours. Hope this was a good introduction for you.